What sort of first aid kit do you carry with you when you're trail running? What's your strategy if you get hurt when you're out there? Let's talk about that.
Hi guys, I'm Dan, and if you're new here, welcome to Strides and Summits. This channel is all about running on the road and on the trails. So if that's what you're into, consider subscribing. Today, I want to talk about my trail running first aid strategy and what I carry with me on my first aid kit when I'm trail running. And I want to have this discussion because I don't think many trail runners are having it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think that many people are thinking about this before they set out on the trail. The reality is that we're hitting these trails and we're going quite quickly, 8, 10, 12 kilometers an hour. Our chances of getting injured are just that much higher. Not to mention, it can be hard to realize just how deep into the backcountry we're getting. 12 kilometers might not seem like that far from a trailhead, but it could take 4 or 5 hours for help to get to us at that point. We can't rely on search and rescue for immediate assistance, and we shouldn't be relying on hikers or other trail users. That's an irresponsible thing to do, to put the reliance on someone else that's out there. So the purpose of this video is to just get you thinking about your first aid strategy and what you would do if you were to get hurt out there on the trail. This is just part of being a responsible trail user, and I want us as trail runners to have a good reputation amongst the community. I want to encourage you to go out there and do the research to figure out what you would do in the case of these sort of injuries. And if it's available to you, I want to strongly encourage you to take a wilderness first aid course. This is a first aid course which focuses on stabilizing a patient in the remote backcountry environment given limited resources. Basically the sort of situation that we put ourselves in. And it just teaches you to be really resourceful and what's important when it comes to first aid in the wilderness. The most important part in a first aid kit is right up here. Your knowledge will take you much further than any piece of equipment in your first aid kit will alone. So you are far better being out there with a high amount of knowledge and no equipment than with all the equipment and no knowledge. Of course, having both is better, but you'd rather have knowledge than equipment. I have to preface this video by saying I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a medic. I don't have any credentials in the medical field. I took a wilderness first aid course about 10 years ago, and I've brushed up frequently on my knowledge of first aid, especially for those factors that would affect a trail runner. The information in this video is just what I would do given my current knowledge and my experience level. I cannot accept any responsibility for what might happen to you out in the wilderness and for your safety on the trail and for the actions that you take with regards to first aid on the trail. That being said, I am the kind of person that likes to be very well prepared for hypotheticals. Let's take this car, for example. In my car, I always keep with me a very well-stocked first aid kit, an emergency triangle, a tool kit, a multimeter, extra oil, shovel, duct tape, a blanket. In the passenger seat, I have a fire extinguisher, and in the glove box, I keep a hammer to break the glass and an emergency vest. Did I mention I'm an Eagle Scout and a pilot? I'm the kind of person that wants to be ready for any hypothetical that could be out there. So I think you can trust me that I would have the same mindset that I put in towards this car and how I keep it stocked that I would have when I go out trail running. So here's how I've set this out. First, I'm going to go through the different first aid situations which I could foresee occurring on a trail run. And then I'm going to go through how I would tackle those scenarios and what sort of equipment or supplies I would use. And then using those, I'm going to assemble my first aid kit and then show you guys how I put this thing together. And because you guys are weight weenies, I'm trying to be as lightweight and as multi-purpose and as practical as possible when it comes to putting together my first aid kit. Believe me though, this is going to be well worth carrying in terms of weight. So what sort of first aid items am I thinking about as a trail runner? Well, I've got items like blisters and chafing. I call that wear and tear. And then you could have things like ticks or other bug bites. I'd call that critters. Then you got your minor injuries. You could have cuts and scrapes or splinters. And these first three items, the wear and tear, the critters, the minor injuries, those are the sort of things where if you've got your first aid kit, you should be able to handle these on the trail and continue with your journey. Then we've got this last category which I call the major injuries. So you could have things like a major sprained ankle or a laceration or an impalement or a broken bone. These are the sort of things where if it happens, your priority is going to change towards getting off the trail and getting help or getting someone in with some external help. And your first aid kit is going to be able to help you stabilize the situation and increase survivability in the event of these cases. Now, obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of things which could happen to you on the trail, but I think if you've got the knowledge and the equipment to handle these scenarios, you should be able to handle more or less anything that nature could throw to you on the trail. And I think your intuition would guide you in the right direction on how to treat whatever specific situation you might end up in. So let's get into what I would do if I encountered these scenarios on the trail. Let's start with blisters. Let's say you're going along, you're starting to get a hot spot. That's where a blister is starting to form. The first thing I would do is I would pull out my Leuko tape. Now this is a high strength medical tape. It's very, very adherent. I pull out about a 3 or 4 inch strip and apply it to, usually it's my heel where I'm starting to get a hot spot, but I apply this and it sticks really well. It provides additional comfort on the blister, and I'd say 90% of the time, just applying some Leuko tape does a great job of preventing that blister from occurring at all. If it's a smaller item on my toe, for example, I carry with me Victorinox Classic Swiss Army knife, and these have a little pair of scissors in them. So then I could cut out the Leuko tape into whatever shape or size that I would need for the delicate areas like around my toes. So I always carry a little Swiss Army knife. This weighs about 21 grams, so I think it's well worth its weight carrying with me. If I get a full blister, if the Leuko tape doesn't work, then I would pull out my blister band-aids. I would carry a couple different sizes with me, maybe 1 or 2 of each. I'm developing a blister, then I'll put one of these on, and that usually does the trick. Now, if I get a full blister and it's causing me discomfort, it's a little bit controversial, but I will try and pop it. So I'll carry with me a safety pin, and in that case, you can just use the sharp end of the safety pin. I'll usually wipe it with a little bit of an alcohol wipe and then go at it with safety pin. I don't usually do that on the trail. That's usually a post-run maintenance kind of thing, but if I do ever feel like I need it on the trail, I'll just take a safety pin with me in case I want to pop a blister while I'm on the trail. You might not do that. You might not feel comfortable doing that. I wouldn't do it if you don't feel comfortable, but that's something that I would personally do. All right, let's talk about chafing. This isn't something that happens to me that often on a road run, but the reality is when you're going out on the trails, it's a little bit different. I usually don't go on road runs that exceed 2 hours, but sometimes I'm on the trail for 5 or 6 hours, and I'm moving in a different way than I'm used to, and I can get chafing in places that I might not have expected it. So I'll bring with me a little bit of petroleum jelly. Now, a little trick for you, this lip balm, especially the Vaseline lip balm, look at the package, but most often it's just petroleum jelly. And this is just a generic brand, but it's the same as the Vaseline lip balm. And it is effectively just a little tub of Vaseline. This one's 8 grams, and it's the perfect size to bring with you if you're on, say, a trail run or a short backpacking trip. So I keep one of these in my first aid kit, and I apply it wherever I would need for chafing if I was in a long run. So let's talk about ticks. I do quite a bit of running in territories where ticks are a problem, so I carry with me in my first aid kit one of these tick hooks. It's super lightweight. This probably weighs less than a gram. And what it is it's a hook with these little slots in it, or with a little slot in it. And if you get a tick, what you'll do is you'll put this underneath the head of the tick, and you'll twist it around. And the tick will lift right up. The whole thing will just lift right out. So that's something that I carry with me, and I'm going to link to a video on how to use one of these, but they work quite effectively, and it's something that I think is worth carrying with me. Now, if I don't have a tick hook with me, then back to the Swiss Army knife. This does have a pair of tweezers on there. You have to be a little bit more careful when you're using tweezers on a tick, but there is a way to do it, and I'll link to a video on that as well. Bug bites, they don't, we're talking something like a mosquito bite. It doesn't really bother me too much, but I found a couple of these afterbite packets. They're just the same thing as the afterbite, but in a wipe, and they weigh like less than a gram. So I'll bring 1 or 2 of these in my first aid kit in case I get a couple of bites of some kind that are just irritating me. Then I can rip this open and wipe down whatever spot it is that I've been bit in, and then hopefully that subsides some of the pain or the itching. All right, so let's talk about cuts and scrapes. So the first thing in the event of a cut or a scrape, I'm going to want to clean out the area. So I'll bring with me a couple of these alcohol wipes to clean out the area. And then I'm going to want to apply some sort of bandage. I carry a couple of these small bandages, but if I need something bigger or a more custom size, I can makeshift something out of some Leuco tape. And I carry with me a small roll of gauze. So this is a 2" by 15 foot. And again, I can pull out the knife, pull out the scissors on my Swiss Army knife, and cut this to size and this to size to basically make a bandage of whatever size that I would need given the injury. And if you want, you can apply a little bit of petroleum jelly to the bandage before you apply it to the wound. From what I've read online, this works about as effectively as an antibiotic ointment like polysporin. And because you're carrying this anyways for the chafing and you have it with you, then you might want to consider putting on the Vaseline, a little bit of Vaseline onto the bandage before applying it to the wound. Okay, so let's talk about splinters. So just to be clear, we're talking about small splinters which have entered the skin and not a impalement. So for this, again, get back to the Swiss Army knife, and on here we have our little pair of tweezers. So I'd use the tweezers to pull out the splinter, and then if you get any sort of bleeding after that, some follow up with a similar procedure to the cuts and scrapes. You're going to want to clean the area with something and then apply some sort of bandage. Now let's get into the major injury items. So the first of which, let's talk about a sprained ankle. Here we're talking about a true sprained ankle where it gets to the point where there's swelling and it's discolored and you physically can't put weight on it. What you're going to want to do in the case of a sprained ankle is the RICE acronym. So you rest, ice, compress, elevate. So rest as in stop running, take a break. Ice, now I don't think it's practical to bring an ice pack with you when you're trail running, but think resourcefully here. You could use the water from a stream, which could be really cold. Rocks in the early morning can be quite cold, so you can probably find something out there that will mimic ice or an ice pack or something cold that you can apply directly to the site. Compress, you can use something like this gauze strip or the Leuco tape or jacket, a bandana. You can basically just get creative using that and a safety pin. I think you could MacGyver something that would act as like a compression bandage on the site, and then elevate to like there. You really just want to get it so it's above your heart, so you want to raise your leg up. But the issue is if you have a true sprained ankle, you're probably not going to be able to run or walk out on that injury. So this is where it's warranted to call for additional help. And this is where carrying a cell phone with you is important when you're going on trail runs. And so if you're within cell phone range, then you can call for additional help using your phone. Or if you're not within cell reception, that's where you're going to want something like this. This is a Spot Gen 3 locator. What it is a GPS locator. I carry it with me when I know that I'm going to be going to areas where there is not cell coverage. And then what I can do is I've got family and friends linked to this device. I can either do a reach out and say, hey, I need help. Or if it's a real emergency, I can press the SOS button and that will activate for search and rescue. And this works in areas where the cell phone does not. If you don't already have one of these and you're hiking or running in the backcountry, I highly recommend looking at the options. Spot is one of the options. Garmin InReach Mini is another option. There's a couple other options out there, but look for a personal locator beacon and strongly consider having one if you're going into places where cell phone coverage is not good. And the final thing in the case of a sprained ankle, you're probably going to be waiting it out a little while. You may want to bring, and I consider this an optional item, but you may want to bring some ibuprofen. I've got some Advil here just as a painkiller while you're waiting out until some additional help can arrive. So let's talk about everyone's favorite, lacerations or big cuts. Let's say that you're running down this hill, going real fast, you trip on a root and you go flying down and you reach your arm out and your arm snags on a branch or a sharp rock, and now you've got a big cut along your arm. Well, the first thing I would do is get out my pair of rubber gloves. This is especially warranted if you're administering first aid on someone else, but I think it's warranted if you're self-administering first aid as well. I think you want to try and keep the area as clean as possible, and gloves are going to help with that. Then you're going to want to clean out the wound. Now, something like an alcohol wipe, I just don't think it's going to be effective in this sort of injury. I'm going to turn towards water to help me out. So I run with these Salomon soft flasks, and if you put a little pressure on the bottle and then squeeze out the tip, you get a really nice stream, and that would work really effectively at cleaning out a wound. Now, if you're not carrying one of those soft flasks, instead you're carrying a regular bottle, like a Life Water bottle, like I do when I'm backpacking, then I've got a little trick for you. So next time that you finish a dish soap in the kitchen, keep the lid to it, because the thread on this matches exactly with the Life Water bottles. And then you can use this to clean out your wound really effectively. Now, if you've got, for example, a long gash, something that might need stitches, what I would do is reach for steri strips. These are wound closure devices. I'm going to link to a video in the description on how to use these, but let's not kid ourselves. You're not going to use thread and needle. Nuh-uh. On the trail, this is the right thing to use. And after applying that, then I'd apply a little bit of gauze and then some Leuko tape, or hold it tight with a bandana or whatever you've got to basically try and keep it as clean as possible until you can get to help. Now, if it's the sort of wound that's like gushing blood, my strategy is to pull out the Celox granules. So what this is it's a blood clotting powder. And effectively what you're going to do is clean up the wound as best as possible. And you're going to rip this open and you're going to pour the contents of the packet into the wound. And then you're going to apply pressure, using something like a bandana or whatever it is, direct pressure, and try and elevate as much as possible as you would normally with a laceration. And I've read reports that this clots large injuries in like 3 or 4 minutes. And I've linked to a video on how to use these granules as well. So I definitely recommend looking at that, but I would use that. And so then if you're at the point where you've used the Celox granules and you can't stop the bleeding, I think then you're looking at the point of needing a tourniquet. In that case, I'd get resourceful with what I have. Maybe I would use the headband from my flashlight. Maybe I'd use a bandana or a jacket or another piece of clothing and just make a tourniquet out of that. I think it goes without saying, if you're getting out the Celox granules or the steri strips, or if you're making a tourniquet, your priority is going to be getting to medical help. Okay, these are temporary solutions which buy you time, but they are not a permanent solution. You will need to be getting to an emergency room, getting to a doctor as soon as possible, and your priorities should be on getting help. Take the same scenario. You're running down the trail and then you trip, you fall. This time, instead of cutting yourself on a sharp rock, you hit a branch, and that branch goes through you into your chest, for example, and now you've got an impalement. The most important thing about this is to not remove the object. Okay, it's probably holding back a lot of blood, and if you pull out the object, you'll probably bleed profusely. So you want to do your best to immobilize the object to prevent it from moving. If you're stuck on a branch, you might try and find some way to saw it off. I don't have a saw on this Swiss Army knife, for example, but there are some Swiss Army knives that have little saws on them that you might be able to use to saw whatever object it is to a smaller, more portable size. But you're going to want to use something like a jacket or a bandana or another piece of clothing or whatever you can find in the woods to try and immobilize the object and comfort the patient as best as possible. I think it goes without saying at this point it's warranted to be calling for help either with a cell phone or using your personal locator beacon and call for help. You're going to need external help at this point. So at this point, you're basically just stabilizing the situation, stabilizing the patient, and just buying yourself time until you can get external help. In a similar sort of situation for a broken bone, this kind of depends where on the body. If it's in your lower body, if it's on your leg, for example, you're probably not going to be able to walk out on that injury. So you're going to have to just try and stabilize the situation as best as possible. You might try and make a splint using something like some sticks that you find in the woods, and then fashion with a bandana or with a jacket again, form some kind of splint. If it's on your arm, you might be able to make a sling of some kind, again using a jacket and 1 or 2 safety pins, and then you might be able to sling your arm up in such a way where it's comfortable enough to be able to walk out. But again, your priority is going to shift towards getting the patient assistance and getting to help, or getting help to you as soon as possible. Again, you're probably going to be phoning for help or using your locator beacon in this case. In the event of this sort of scenario, I consider this optional, but I might carry some ibuprofen with me. This is Advil, just to subside some of the pain while you're waiting for external help to arrive. All right, so here are all the items that I used when we were discussing about the different injuries that I might foresee happening on the trail. So let's go through this. So first I've got our leuco tape. So instead of having the big roll like this, you don't need, 20 meters of this stuff. So I take out about 2 meters or 6 feet and then just bunch it up into a little roll, and this is nice and lightweight. You've got our blister band-aids, you've got our safety pin, got our petroleum jelly, alcohol wipes, afterbite wipe, 2 bandages, a gauze bandage. You've got our rubber gloves, which I put into a little bag, and I think that's a good idea for 2 reasons. First, it keeps the gloves clean, which you're going to want them clean when you actually need them. And secondly, if you ever did use the gloves, you're going to want a bag to put them back into, because now you've got bloody gloves and bloody, gauze and all of that. You're going to want somewhere to put your nasty garbage, and then you have a bag to put it in. Then we've got our Cellex granules, our steri strips, a bag to put it in. So all this is going to go in there. And then I've got sort of situational dependent or optional items I consider. I've got my tuck hook. I've got that little nozzle for squeezing if you're carrying just a regular water bottle. I've got ibuprofen, Advil in this case, just a couple tablets as a painkiller. And then for me, something that's not necessarily first aid, but what I keep in my kit as well, is Aquatab. So this is a water purification tablet. It's two per liter, so 1 per half a liter, like my soft flasks are half a liter, so they get 1 of these. And so that gives you, that's 10 tablets in here, so that's 5 liters of filtered water. And let's be honest, it's not first aid, but getting more water in means preventing dehydration. So that can be a preventative to a first aid issue. And then the other things that I mentioned, which I usually or almost always carry with me when I'm on a trail run. So I've got my Victorinox Classic knife. I've got the Spot Gen 3 locator. I've got my cell phone. And then we've also got a jacket and a bandana. But let's pack this guy up. Most importantly, the leuco tape on top, because that's probably the thing I access the most in my first aid kit. So there it is. Everything that you need in a nice little compact package. And this will fit really nicely just into the side pocket on your vest when you're trail running, for example. And honestly, you'll hardly notice it, you'll hardly feel it when you're out there running. Let's get a weight check on this guy. 66 grams. Let's check a couple of items that are similar in weight to this. Power gel weighs 42 grams. Gloves weigh 53 grams. Ultralight headlamp weighs 54 grams. Cliff bar weighs 70 grams. Oh, and in case you guys were curious, the spot locator weighs 118 grams. The Victorinox Classic knife weighs 22 grams. And there you have it, my lightweight trail running first aid kit. At 66 grams, it weighs less than a Cliff bar. Now this will give you enough energy for an hour. This could save your life. I'm not saying that this isn't important, but if you're taking this, then you can justify taking this. I invite you to build your own kit and adjust it as you feel necessary. Maybe there's things that I took that you don't feel necessary, or things that you want to increase the quantities of. You can do that. Maybe there's a bug or a spider or a snake in your area and you want to take meds for that. You can do that. Maybe you have certain medication that you need to take. Definitely would want to take that with you. Maybe you have an allergic reaction to something, you want to take your EpiPen. Absolutely. Maybe you have an allergy to ibuprofen and instead of Advil, you want to put an alternative in. Or maybe if you or someone in your group is at risk for a heart attack, you might want to take something like aspirin. I also think this is a reasonably good kit for day hikers too. The sort of injuries that you come across are very similar to what a trail runner would come across. So this kit is also very similar to the first aid kit I bring with me when I go on solo backpacking trips. I make a couple of additions in that case. I add in an anti-diarrheal, some Benadryl, some hand sanitizer, and I increase the quantity of a couple of items, especially like blister band-aids. But with those additions, this actually makes a really good ultralight backpacking first aid kit as well. So what sort of first aid do you guys carry with you? Did you note anything that I missed in this video? Or do you have a better approach to something that I did? If so, note it in the comments below and share it with the community. I hope you found this video useful. I hope it got you thinking about first aid when you're on the trail. And if it did, give it a like, share it with your friends, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really hope that you never have to use the information that you've learned in this video, but if you ever do, I think you'll be glad that you did. So stay safe on the trails, and until next time, keep putting one foot in front of the other. Would you just expect me to waste all this ketchup? Pretty good chips.